First of all, Bonita, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know you're an extremely busy person, and I really appreciate your time. So today, I want to give you a platform to tell us about your fascinating life and a little bit about some of the work you do here in Kelowna. Tell us how you got to Kelowna in the first place.
Thank you very much, Luke. I'm delighted to be here. So the way I came to Kelowna actually has a lot to do with the work that I do. I work as a psychic, life, and business coach. And in January 2011, I was living in Kingston, Ontario. And I had been there for about 15 years. I had loved it there. Before that, I was in Mississauga. I moved around a lot. I'd been living in Northern Ontario, then Southern Ontario, Mississauga as a kid. Born in Montreal. So I've lived all over the Eastern. I'd never been further west than Manitoba. And one day I woke up and Kingston didn't fit anymore. It's like trying on a pair of shoes that just don't fit right. I loved the city, but I knew I didn't belong there anymore. Not that there was anything wrong with being there. It just wasn't where I was supposed to be. And so I will get those times where I know it's time to make a move, whether it's a change in, job or work situation or like home, whatever it is, right? Whatever I need to change, it'll suddenly just not feel quite right. And I kept getting the word Kelowna. I didn't know anything about Kelowna, except that it was in BC.
Right.
And just to give you an idea of exactly how ignorant I was, I pictured it was some kind of desert. Okay, no idea that it was irrigated and green. So it wouldn't leave me alone. This was January 2011, and I was very aware that I was supposed to be moving here. But there were some shifts in me that had to occur before I was really ready to be here. So I didn't actually make the move until September 3rd, 2011. And I came here with 1 month's income in my bank account, a plane ticket, a rental up at Big White, and the promise of 2 yoga classes a week to teach at a local studio. That's all I had coming here, and the awareness that I was supposed to be here.
When you say the word or the name Kelowna kept coming up, were you seeing articles or TV programs, or was it just the name in your head, some kind of intuition?
It was in my head. What had happened is in my previous marriage, we had talked about BC, and we had looked all over the map. Bella Coola, Bella Bella, Nanaimo, everything you can imagine. So I was aware of the city of Kelowna existing, but I still didn't know anything about it. But the word just wouldn't leave me alone. And when I contemplated it internally, I work a lot with energy. So in my mind, I said the word Kingston, and it was like a door shut. And when I said Kelowna, it was like all the energy just opened up. And it's like, oh, okay, the energy is going there. I know that sounds really hippy-dippy. But it's been interesting because in my time in Kelowna, I've met a lot of people who came here because of their intuition. They had dreams, just something in them would nudge them here. And for all of us who landed here and sort of look around and go, wow, this is paradise. We're like so happy that our intuition led us here.
Yeah. That is so true. People ask me if I have any regrets about coming here, and I say I do have one regret, and that is that I didn't come sooner. But I came in 2011 as well, so it's very interesting. So you started in Big White. Tell us about your experience so far. Is it everything you expected? Is it better, worse? What did you discover about Kelowna that you didn't know before you decided to come?
Well, this is where it gets really funny because when I knew where I was going to be staying, and the people who rented it to me knew I was from Ontario, and they said, "Oh yeah, you're 10 minutes from downtown." That was really funny. So here I am on Google, the maps, not the maps, the
Earth?
yes, Google Earth. And I went down and I'm looking on the map there to see the area where I'm going to be staying. And I'm thinking to myself, Well, this looks like a very remote place. I guess I can order everything I need over the internet. So when I actually landed, I looked around as I'm driving into Kelowna thinking, okay, I can do this. And my first night, I drive up to Big White, and I'm I'm from Ontario, where if you're 10 feet off the main level of ground, there's a railing.
Yeah.
And I'm driving up the mountain, and I'm looking around. It's 9:30 at night. I'm dodging wolves and deer, thinking it's my first night in Kelowna, and I'm going to die. But when I woke up in the morning and I looked out at the mountains, I was gobsmacked. I couldn't believe where I'd landed. And it's been 8 years and I'm still pinching myself. It's the most exquisitely beautiful place to live. It amazes me that there are times of year where you can ski and swim in the lake on the same day. I remember it was September and I was walking along the water thinking, it's 28 degrees. It's September. It's like 15 and raining back where I come from.
Right.
And I would talk to people and go, this is such an amazing place. And they'd be like, yeah, don't tell anybody. It's magical, and it's magical for a lot of reasons. The terrain is incredibly beautiful. It is the best weather in Canada. It's definitely the place to come to work and play. And it's the people. The reason I have been successful in my business is the people. From the moment I landed, people went out of their way to make me feel welcome, to give me a place to live, to get me started in building my business exactly the moment I landed. In fact, even before that, because I had written to all the yoga studios saying, I'm landing September 3rd. I'd love to come and teach. And one owner reached out to me and said, my yin yoga teacher is leaving at the beginning of September. You're hired. She hadn't met me, and she'd already hired me. She said, I want to meet you when you get off the plane. I got this warm welcome, and immediately my stress level dropped dramatically, knowing here was somebody ready to meet me when I landed. So and I've just continued to encounter that everywhere I go. All the time I've been here, when people in Kelowna say, let's meet for coffee, they mean it.
Right. That's wonderful. So you were a yoga instructor. Do you still do that? And tell us about your work. Tell us what you do and how you spend your time on a typical day.
Wow, that's a great question. Yes, I still teach yoga. It's not as much of when I first landed, I was within 2 months teaching 10 classes at 2 studios a week. Now it's a much smaller part of what I do, but it really did help me to get established here and, help me pay my rent and just get myself going. So primarily, I work as a psychic life and business coach, but I wear a lot of hats in doing that. So I do teach yoga for a private corporation that has me going into people's homes and businesses, usually one-on-one, sometimes doing group classes and stagettes and things, which is great fun. But my days really vary, and it's I think quite typical of people working in Kelowna. We are the most entrepreneurial community in Canada. And my days can be, I might wake up and go teach yoga and then go to my office and coach clients, and it might be about their business, it might be relationship, family situations, romance, career changes. Sometimes I'm designing somebody's website for them. I also have my volunteer activities. I teach yoga as a volunteer sometimes for Koha, sometimes for Brain Trust. I also walk dogs for the SPCA. So it's such a varied life, and my day is interspersed with lunch at a cafe with a friend, or a hike up Knox Mountain, or a walk along the waterfront. I like to start near the bridge and end up at the bird sanctuary. And that's the beauty of my life. I am never bored. There's always something fun to do. And I travel quite a bit through the Okanagan as a speaker, workshop facilitator, doing sessions with clients. I also do parties. So I'm just having a wonderful time here. I truly pinch myself every day.
That is fantastic. I'm curious about what you said you did yoga for stagette. Have you done that more than once? And what's that like? I mean, when I hear of stagettes, I think they're getting like male strippers, everybody's getting really drunk. And you actually taught some yoga at a stagette.
It's something I do every now and then. So many people come here as a wedding destination, of course. So sometimes it's been teaching a class outside the Delta. And it's interesting, yeah, we think of stagettes as people getting drunk and having strippers, but the people I've met, they're having yoga with me, then they're off to play golf or go on a boat tour. I actually had one morning at Bottega where the bride said, I don't want to be with my shoulders up around my ears in my wedding photos. So 8:30 in the morning, I'm under the trees teaching a yoga class before her wedding on the day of her wedding.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so it's another thing getting to do yoga outside here. I've taught yoga on the edge of a cliff at Gallagher's Canyon. It's really an incredible setting in which to do outdoor yoga. Sometimes we're in studios and sometimes we're outside, and a lot of people actually look for a very well-rounded, very healthy way to enjoy their friends. And sometimes I'm doing that as psychic readings as well. A bunch of folks will get together. Sometimes it's a bachelorette party, sometimes just a birthday party. And on occasion, they all want to be in the room together. And that's really fun because I'll be picking up something from somebody and I'll tell them what I'm seeing and they'll go, I'm not seeing that. Meanwhile, their friends are all nodding, going, oh, yeah, we see it. So then it just becomes a big laugh for all of us, and it's a lot of fun.
Tell us a little more about your psychic and energy work. I've taught in the past, but as a teacher, I find that I have to take in information. I have to learn and be observant and gather information so I have things to share. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you get the insights that you have. Is it something you're born with, or is it something you cultivate? How do you know what to advise people?
Another great question. Well, just to preface, intuition is knowing things without deduction.
Okay.
You know because you know.
Right.
And I believe we're all born psychic. I think it's a natural built-in mechanism. I think it started out as a survival mechanism. In fact, I remember there was a study that said that one of the inborn mechanisms we have is knowing if somebody is standing behind you staring at you. Mm-hmm. And when you think about it, if you don't have that ability, well, you would be one of the cavemen clubbed over the head who didn't survive to reproduce.
Very true.
But I was fortunate. I grew up in a psychic family. My grandmother was a medium in England. My mother's like this. My kids are like this. So I grew up having clairaudience, clairvoyance, the ability to see and hear things most people can't. And in my family, it was so normal that if I said to my mom, I heard this or I saw that, she'd be like, that's nice, dear. Right. Whereas a lot of children, they're told, oh, don't be so silly, or, oh, you've got a great imagination. And because as children, we're looking to adults to define what reality is for us, we start to dismiss our own experiences. Right. And then, so we suppress it. But it's entirely possible to bring it forward again. And in fact, I teach a lot of workshops where I teach people how to cultivate their skills. Mm-hmm. And really, I'm just reminding them of what they intrinsically know. So in my work, I work as an empath. And one way of putting it is everybody is an energy field. And that energy field holds all the information about us and our connection to the universe. So if you think of it like the movie The Matrix, there's how everything appears in Neo's world, and then there's the code. It's like being able to look at the code. So when I tune in, I might get imagery, messages, like verbal messages. I might pick up somebody's emotions, or even something physically going on in the body. Mm-hmm. I also work with the cards, not to predict the future, because you're creating that with every decision you make. More to show you the subconscious patterns informing your decision making. And then I help people to shift those patterns if they're not working for them. I help them to bring them to consciousness. Because the more, as you said, the more information we have, the more aware we are, the more effective we are. So my job is to bring things to people's awareness and then teach them, if they wish to learn, how to tune into that awareness themselves so they become their own psychics.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is similar to yoga. You're a practitioner, you're a teacher, you're good at it, but you still have your own practice that keeps you fine-tuned, right? I think it's similar to any kind of profession or any skill. We still need to practice. For me, it's taking in information, learning all the time. So what is your daily practice for yourself to help you be, finely tuned to other people's emotions, to situations, or do you just flow through and everything's set, or do you have like a diet of certain things you read or certain practices?
Yeah, I think it's true. We all do have to keep ourselves polished, and I do think that to be good at the kind of work I do, you have to be working on yourself.
Right.
Always. Because as soon as you say I've arrived, I know everything I need to know, you become stale, and then
Right.
you're no good to anybody.
Right.
So for me, I've had a mentor for over 35 years, and he has permission to push all my buttons and make me look at the stuff in myself that I don't want to look at.
Right.
Because a lot of times I'm working with the shadow, and we've been taught to fear the shadow or think of it as negative things about ourselves we don't want to know and we don't want the world to know.
Right.
But there's a lot of power there. And if you're willing to look at your own shadow and look at those things that are sort of hidden in your psyche, then more of you becomes present. You have more energy, because it takes a lot of energy to hold those parts down. And you're more present, and you're making your decisions with more of you participating in that. And I've been doing this since I was 18, doing actual professional readings since I was 18. And I've also got a background as a crisis worker and suicide interventionist. So if clients go into crisis, I'm absolutely able to be present and support them through it. My abilities have been cultivated over the years, so I can actually see the chakra system now, and energy field, and connect with people who've passed. So I'm kind of a one-stop psychic shop.
Nice.
But I go to workshops. For example, I was in Ontario recently taking Dr. Robert Holden's coach camp. I have those teachers whom I really like to explore. Ram Dass's work. He's been an influence on me since I first started meditating at 13. And meditation is part of my practice, not always conventional, not always sitting there, going within. I meditate from the standpoint of looking at everything around me as a quantum universe. It's all a reflection of my consciousness.
Right.
Why did this person show up today? Why did I encounter that situation? What is it trying to tell me about what's happening internally? So my whole life is a contemplation. I also love Adyashanti, Pema Chodron. These are very grounded teachers. They're going deep into meditative experiences, but they're also very grounded in the real world, and their teachings are very applicable to everyday life.
Nice.
I've also traveled. I spent 6 weeks in Nepal and Tibet. That had been a lifelong dream. At 20, I told myself when I turned 50 I would go to Tibet, and so I did.
Nice.
And it was just amazing to see people who really live that awareness that we're all connected. When they put their hands together and look in your eyes and say, Namaste, it is such a deep connection. They don't hold any of themselves back. We in North America, we tend to say, I'll share this little bit of me, and if you treat that part well, I might show you more.
Right.
They're just all in, which is very refreshing and unnerving at the same time when you think, oh my God, I need to be all in as well. And then it really shows us where we're holding ourselves back.
Yeah.
So much of my work is creating a safe space for people to let up aspects of themselves they suppressed. And whether it's fear that shows up in my office, I have a very lovely, quiet, private office,
Yes.
or whether it's grief or rage, all aspects are welcome, all will be shown respect, and introduced to the other aspects they're already conscious, so that there's more and more integration. Because I think the main purpose that we're in this life as, I think, divine beings having a human experience is to wake up, is to become more conscious. And I think we come here almost like it's like taking a course. I've come here, I want to learn certain lessons. I'm going to be born to the parents who will plant the seeds for the lessons I want to learn in this lifetime. I'm going to encounter people and situations that will reinforce those lessons. And when I avoid something, the universe is going to put it in front of me again, only stronger, until I do the work. And I'll meet those people along the way that will support me on my journey. As Ram Dass put it, we're all just walking each other home. So the people who come to me, I have something to offer them based on what I've learned so far. They have something to offer the people they meet based on what they've learned so far. We're all helping each other out. We all have something to offer because we've all had a unique journey that has a piece of the puzzle other people don't have.
I wonder if you had any experiences that were frightening or troubling for you. Like when someone comes in your office and you say if there's been fear or trauma or grief, and you can see that quite clearly, even before the person maybe is totally comfortable expressing it. Have you seen anything that kind of shocks you or that made you recoil or difficult to deal with yourself?
Another great question. Well, my philosophy is whoever walks into my office is a reflection of a part of me.
Okay.
So I need to be willing to look at my shadow. I had a very interesting encounter at a bus stop one day. My car was in the shop getting my winter tires put on, and I walked to the bus stop, and there's this gentleman there, and he decides he's going to have a conversation with me.
Right.
And he starts to tell me with lots of invective, he's swearing up a storm. He's so angry the last driver took him to the wrong stop. He missed his appointment with his parole officer. And if the next driver takes him to the wrong stop, he's going to smash a window on the bus. Now I'm looking at him thinking, wow, what part of my inner masculine have I just met? So I just stayed open and I listened. And open doesn't mean you're necessarily serene. It might be you're struggling with something, but you're willing to have your own stuff come up and observe it without trying to push it back down. Okay. So I just stayed open and I listened. And the only thing I said was, when he talked about breaking a window on the bus, that might not yield the results you're looking for. But what was fascinating is because here was his feminine reflection, open and listening, he would swear up a storm and then stop and look at me and say, I'm sorry, I'm swearing. And then the pattern would take hold again and he'd swear some more and stop and say, I'm sorry, I'm swearing. And this continued. So it was fascinating because he's probably used to getting either a wall, people just ignore him, or a pushback, don't talk to me, don't swear at me. But because his reflection was open and listening, for moments at a time, he could see his own harshness and even apologize for it, even though I'd said nothing about the way he was speaking.
Right.
So I leave at the end of our interaction, after I've gotten off the bus, and I think to myself, what part of me thinks the world is against it, is harsh, is defensive? And I've spent years contemplating my teacher. Mm-hmm. Because that was one of my teachers. Our teachers often show up in those disguises, right? They don't always show up on a podium.
Right.
So if somebody's in my office, sometimes you're right, I will see something inside of them because I see people in layers.
Right.
And sometimes I'll see somebody just waiting off off stage, just in the wings that needs to come forward. And I'll remark on that, and I'll ask them sometimes to breathe into a part of their body where that part is sitting, or I'll invite that part to come forward, or I'll give them an activity to do to let up the rage or the fear. And that sometimes they're a little uncomfortable at first, but when they realize, I'm serious, you can yell at me and it's totally okay, like you can let this stuff come up. And my office is soundproof, which is awesome.
That's good.
Yeah, because
about
people can be really comfortable letting up whatever needs to come up and not feel like anybody's listening in, right?
Right.
And it's interesting because often if the warrior comes out first, it will then step aside and let me see the soft, vulnerable child part it's been protecting for maybe 40 or 50 years. Because the warrior wasn't shut down. It wasn't told, oh, don't do that, right? All parts of us are valuable. All emotions are just energy in motion. And little kids don't put value judgments on their feelings. It's adults that project that on them And then they start to suppress those feelings, thinking, not just I shouldn't let somebody know I'm angry or I'm sad. I am bad. I am wrong for having that feeling. They start to push it down inside. It starts to become part of their shadow. And my job is to help them unpack the luggage and start to integrate it.
I've had a couple of sessions with you, and I can say it's wonderful. It's a wonderful experience, and you realize things that you didn't realize before, or at least not consciously. Everything you told me, I said, yeah, that makes sense. So it wasn't like shocking or no, that's not me, but it was things that was mostly unconscious. You touched on the concept of masculine and feminine energy, and I know in our culture there's a lot of misconceptions about that. So maybe you could tell us for a moment what is masculine and feminine energy?
Thank you, Luke. And I appreciate your comments about your sessions with me. As you know, I do respect confidentiality, and that's not something I would convey to anybody myself, so I appreciate that. So when I talk about masculine and feminine, I'm not talking about gender. It's the quality of energies. The feminine is the intuitive, receptive energy, and I see it as the internal connection with our real internet, the universe. In quantum physics, it's called entanglement. Everything's hooked up to everything else. It's got the big picture. That's where our knowing comes from. That doesn't come through deduction. We know because we know. We're tapped into everything. And when we relax enough and allow that part of us to speak to us, that still small inner voice, it will give us information we can't possibly get through analysis.
Right.
The masculine is the active principle. It's the energy that acts on the information of the feminine. So if we're too much in our feminine, we've got great ideas we don't do a darn thing with. Right. For everybody who invented a pet rock, there's 20,000 people who wish they had or thought of it but didn't do it, right?
Right.
And then if we're too much in the masculine, we're trying a bunch of things, hoping something works. But there's a lot of wasted action on the way to getting to what does. So I'll give you an example of working the feminine and masculine together, shall I? Let's start with the fact that your gut and that gut instinct is a real thing. The enteric nervous system in our intestines has 100 million neurons. Scientists call it our second brain. So when we get a gut reaction, that's actually that part of us giving us information. So a few years ago, I had plans, it was New Year's Eve, and I had plans that evening to go out with some friends to go dancing. And around 10 o'clock that morning, a friend texts me and says, Bonita, a bunch of us are getting together for dinner at 6. Do you want to join us? Now, there is a difference between our inner voice and our patterns. Our patterns are our conditioned learning, that's our ego, that we were raised with, ideas projected on us from early childhood. So my patterns go, I like people, I like food, I am so there. But my gut clenched. And I went, wow, that's interesting. So I did something most of us never do. I bought myself time to find out why it did that. A lot of us just run our patterns. I don't want to disappoint my friends, I'll say yes. Mm-hmm. But I believe that when we listen to our inner voice, we're always in the right place at the right time, doing what we are actually supposed to be doing, whatever our path is. Right. So I texted my friend back. I'm waiting to hear back from someone. I'll let you know. I was waiting to hear back from me.
Right.
Right? So I had some things to do. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I had time to check in again. Now my pattern is really loud. I really like people. I really like food. I don't want to disappoint my friends. I'm a good friend if I go. I'm not if I don't. But I checked in and I still got that clench. So I asked my inner voice, why can't I go? Because I couldn't think of any reason not to. Mm-hmm. And the message I got was, you're going to have a client at that time. Okay. So it's 2 o'clock on New Year's Eve. My phone has not rung, but that's what my inner voice is telling me. So I text my friend back. This is the masculine acting on the feminine.
Right.
Feminine knowledge, right? And purely that knowledge, because I've got no other information to go on. I text my friend back. I'm sorry, I've got an overlap. I'll see you at the dance at 8 o'clock.
Nice.
Right? 4:30, the call comes. I'm just in town for the day. I've heard about you. I really want to see you. Can I see you at 6 o'clock? I spent 90 minutes with my client. I had 30 minutes to get to the dance.
Very cool. That's super cool. So if we get a gut instinct, it doesn't necessarily mean like there was something wrong with your friends or something bad was going to happen at the dinner. It's just something else is happening. And your feminine side is aware of it. And so the masculine side is taking action, saying, here's how I'm going to schedule the next 3 hours. Here's what I'm going to do. And it worked out.
Well, it's even more than that, actually, because what the client had said was that they had really wanted to see me. They'd been there, like been in town all week. They hadn't been able to connect. But that morning, they had placed an intent that somehow they were going to connect with me that day. They had a busy day. They couldn't contact me till 4:30. So if you think about the real internet, right, the entanglement, the internet connectivity of this, the whole universe is one unified field of energy experiencing itself in myriad forms. Everything's hooked up to everything. So if you think of it as her intention went out like an email, right? It rippled out into the fabric of the universe, and my gut got the message, right? Yeah. So when you think about our computers, they're really a very pale reflection of the real internet. Right. When you think about how many of us have gone to call somebody, we pick up the phone, that person's on the other end, they called us at the same time. Or we know when our kids are going through some kind of trouble. I remember as a kid, we'd been away for a few days and we were coming home, and on the way home, I had this awful feeling in my body. I was maybe 9 or 10 at the time. All the way home, it's like, something's wrong, something's wrong. Something's wrong with one of my cats. We get home. While we'd been gone, somebody'd come in to feed the cat, but I guess later on that day, the cat had chased a marble under the fridge, got its toe pads caught under the bottom of the fridge, and it was sitting there with its little foot caught under the fridge. My dad had to take the bottom of it apart to get the cat out, to get the paw out. So I picked up on my cat's distress signal. Right? Everything's connected. And we've all had these experiences. Most of us dismiss it as coincidence, but the more you go, oh, okay. Think of it this way. When your intuition feeds you information and you follow through, it goes, hey, they're listening. Here's some more information. I've woken up in the morning and been told by my subconscious, go downtown and stand in this store at 1 o'clock. And you're only given information on a need-to-know basis. Right. And where I was living at the time, downtown was a 45-minute drive. So I drove downtown and I stood in that store. And within minutes, somebody walks in I haven't seen in 5 years. Wow. But you're not given that information because you would then distort reality, be thinking about what you're going to say to that person or whether you even want to meet that person. Right. The universe only gives you information on a need-to-know basis. That's how I became a yoga teacher. I was in Kingston, walking downtown shopping with a friend. I walked by a yoga studio, and my inner voice said, go in there and say you want to work there. Now, sometimes, to see if it really is my intuition, I test it. I continued to walk past, went in the next store with my friend, but the voice became insistent. No, go back there and say you want to work there. Interesting. Now, what's also interesting is all that my ego could make of that. Because the work I do, I was doing it as a sideline for a long time before it became my full-time profession. At this point, I had just left a job as a university administrator. It's one of the reasons I can work with people at the corporate level. I've had a lot of background in corporation and working for companies. So now I was just working on my own, building my business. So what I thought about the message was, well, I like yoga. I'll get free yoga classes if I work at the front desk, and I'll probably meet some people and maybe I'll make some contacts for my business. That's all my ego, my limited ego consciousness, could make of this, because it's like a horse with blinders on. It doesn't have the big picture, right? So I opened the door to the studio, and the owner is now standing in the doorway. So I said, hi, I want to work here, because that's what I was told to say. So she had a chat with me. She was very intuitive. And after we had a brief conversation, she said, okay, I'm going to put you at the front desk. But I sense you could hold space for a class. I want you to become a yoga teacher. Now, I should preface this by saying I was 47 years old, and I just spent the 2 previous years walking on and off with a cane because of back issues. So, yes, we're not talking like I'm this 20-year-old, who can do all this stuff.
So months later, I'm teaching yoga. My back is healing. So I'm very flexible as a result of having healed it through yoga. And it was my foot in the door to Kelowna. So you never know how the universe plans things for you. We don't have the big picture. A lot of listening to your intuition is just acting on what you're getting and trusting it'll take you where you're supposed to go, even if you don't know what that is. And it won't always lead you to the most comfortable experiences. And that is often why people don't trust or don't want to listen to their intuition, because it'll tell you, you need to leave this job or this relationship, or you need to move across the country. That's not comfortable. Right. Your ego will freak out. My moving here wasn't easy. I would, when I first landed here, I'd go out and I'd go to referral groups and I'd meet people and I'd hand out cards and let people know I was here. And I'd go home at night and I'd sometimes stew in my own terror because my ego had nothing to hang its hat on. I was in a place I'd never been before. Right. Right? And so when you listen to your intuition, it will sometimes take you way out of your comfort zone. But that's where all the growth happens. Right. It certainly doesn't happen. And, the ego will go, this is prison, but at least I know this prison, right? Right. That's not where our growth happens. That's not where we wake up.
I'd like to expand on this concept a little more because a lot of us feel that we make bad decisions. I've had this experience, especially when I was younger, that I thought I was going on my gut instinct, and things turned out what I experienced as bad. Like, I should not have done that. I should not have invested in that business. I should not have, right? And to me, it feels like a big mistake. So is there a way we can fine-tune that or hone that or know which signals to trust?
Again, an excellent question. So one of the things about our society is that it's that don't just sit there, do something attitude.
Right.
So it really should be don't just do something, sit there.
Right.
Sit until you know, and then act. So a lot of times when we think we're trusting our gut, if we were to sit still and say, well, I'll sleep on it overnight, see if I'm still feeling the same way tomorrow, we tend to get closer to really hearing ourselves. Right. Right? Sometimes we'll follow our intuition. I remember recently I invested some serious money in a course. And that course taught me everything I didn't want to do. And I came away with something opposite of what the intention of the course was, but it was still very valuable for me, and it's information I'll carry forward. So I think one of the things we want to stop doing, and I think we all do this in our society, we beat ourselves up a lot for decisions. I think about what project managers do at the end of a project. They do something called lessons learned. All the shareholders get together and they say, okay, what did we learn from this project? What worked? What didn't work? Let's take it apart. Right. And now we know, okay, next time we need to increase the scope and bring the drywallers in sooner so that we get, the carpets in sooner, whatever, right? Whatever the scope is that needs to change. So each project gets better. They don't flagellate themselves with a cat of nine tails and say, I'm so stupid. Right. That's wasted energy, right? So I think when you think about your situation, have you learned a lot by that misadventure?
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes it takes time. For me, you got to get past it a little bit. And then you realize, hey, that was actually a really good lesson. And I can avoid the pain in the future by doing that differently. And I do recall some decisions that I view as bad decisions were kind of impulsive and kind of out of that desire to be doing something. I was actually retired at the age of 39, and I felt like I should be doing something. And someone suggested an investment to me, and I was like really excited, but my gut was churning, and it was saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And a friend of mine said to me, I said, what do you think? And she said, I think you're going to love it for about a month, and then you're going to be absolutely sick about it and wonder how you're going to get out. And I didn't listen to her. And she turned out to be 100% correct. But in hindsight, I think it's okay because I had to learn that lesson to really understand the messages that my guts are telling me is one lesson that I had to learn. And I probably wouldn't have learned it as well unless I went through that experience. So everything is good.
Absolutely. And you're pointing out something interesting too, is that sometimes we act out of fear of not taking action.
Right.
And it's interesting because of my unusual skill set, I get offered a lot of opportunities. And I will sit down and I will have coffee with the person and I will listen to all the ideas they have about what they would like me to do. And then I say, okay, thank you. Now I'm going to go home and go intuitive on it. And I'll sit with it. And what I'll ask is this my path? And sometimes I'll get told, you'd be very good at this, Bonita, and you'd make a lot of money at it, but it's not your path.
Right.
And that's all I need to know, right? My rational mind can rationalize all kinds of reasons why I should do something. But if it's not my path, it's just not my path. And I don't need to know why it's not my path. Right. But all of us at times go off our path, and really that's part of the path. Right? We will make a decision. And what's interesting for you is you got such a powerful lesson in that you had a reflection of your feminine externalized, telling you this is a bad idea. And one of the things the universe will do is when we can't find a part of ourselves internally, it'll put it out here. It'll put it out in the universe in terms of another person giving us that information. That also includes our shadow. The stuff about ourselves we don't want to see will sometimes show up externally. That person who scares us or irritates the heck out of us, what you can say, what part of me is that?
Right.
And then you can start to look for it internally. The more you can find those parts internally, the less the universe has to put them outside of you.
Right.
Right? But I think of somebody like Leonard Cohen is a good example. Okay? He had a few $1,000,000 sitting in the bank. He decided, and he was in his 70s, he was going to retire. He goes off to an ashram. He comes back, and the man he had entrusted with investing his money had embezzled it.
Wow.
So I find that fascinating because he went off to have a spiritual experience, and that changes your world in such a way that he comes back and it's like, no, the universe is not done with you. You still have to work some more. You still have something to contribute. So whenever I'm talking to people about walking their spiritual path, I always say walk it without attachment to outcome. Because you can't do the spiritual work saying, can I do this work, but I want to keep that boyfriend. I want to keep this house. No. The real spiritual work is all about surrender. It's doing what's in front of you, doing what you know you're supposed to do without trying to control for the outcome, because that's you trying to control reality. You know that show, Once Upon a Time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There is a line that gets said over and over in the show. Magic comes with a price. And there's a lot of people who do what we call sorcery. They are trying to manipulate reality. Some people call that the law of attraction, but it's not the way the law of attraction was meant to be applied. They'll say, I'm placing the intent to have this specific thing. And then they pour all their energy into creating that. And they might create it, but they pay a price for that. Right? You look at somebody like Steve Jobs, who materialized all these amazing things, seemingly like magic, and yet he died so young, right? Yeah. What was the cost to him of all of that, right? Yeah. And then, the way I look at the law of attraction is I will place an intent. So I placed an intent to have a comfortable, affluent life doing the work I love. Okay. And then I let go, and the universe then puts everything in place for that. Right. So in my case, the very next day, I got let go from a yoga studio where I was teaching, which was a complete surprise because I was bringing lots of students. Everybody really enjoyed the class. But it was the universe looking at it going, that job isn't going to make you affluent. It's taking way too much of your time for way too little money. And it pushed me up against my patterns around self-worth, doubt, fear, lack, and gave me the opportunity to work on those patterns, which were what were keeping me from having affluence. So now when I teach yoga, I'm making more than any studio can pay me, right? But it's a smaller part of my work because my affluence comes from my main profession, doing my psychic life and business coaching. So that's the interesting thing is If you place intent, careful what you ask for. The universe will immediately start to put it together, but not in the way your ego consciousness will expect. And if you try to control for that, let's put it this way, you might get what you want, but here's another way of looking at it. You might not get what the universe had planned for you, which might have been beyond what you could have imagined. It's like I'll meet people who will say, I found my partner, I made a list of what I was looking for, and then they showed up. Mm-hmm. Great. But what if it was supposed to be somebody else who would have been the person who would have maybe challenged you more or taken you in a direction you never could have imagined your life going? But because you went with what you wanted to look for, you couldn't see that.
Right.
The ego's designed to look for patterns, and the patterns are based on what it already knows. It can't take you anywhere new.
Right.
So when we place intent and we let go, we get shown things we couldn't have imagined. If you had told me 15 years ago, you're going to be living in Kelowna, living this amazing life, you're going to travel to Asia, you're going to ride a motorcycle, you're going to do all kinds of adventurous things, I would have thought you were completely out of your mind. My ego couldn't have imagined this life.
That's fascinating, and I'm gaining insights into myself just hearing you speak, so it's wonderful. I could literally talk to you for hours. I want to try to keep the episodes a little bit brief because mostly it's people driving, and our traffic here in Kelowna is not that bad yet. For those of us who grew up in Mississauga, people will have to listen to episodes like this in a couple of chunks. But it's great. It's really wonderful. I want to thank you so much for sharing with us today. I want to put you on the spot. And if you can think of one person in Kelowna that you find to be a fascinating person and you would love to see come on the show in the future.
Thank you so much, Luke. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you. You're just another one of those wonderful, friendly faces of Kelowna, and that's all I've met since I moved here, so thank you. Thank you for having me here today. In terms of who I would suggest, a dear friend of mine, her name is Natasha Rosewood, and she's also a psychic. Wonderful. I think you'd find her really pleasant company. You'd enjoy her.
And that is the end of episode number 17 of the I Love Kelowna podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please be sure to subscribe in iTunes and give us a 5-star review when you get a chance. Coming up next, Stephen Mazer from Raymond James, Loyal Woolridge from Loyal Hair, and Roz Huber from Moksha Yoga. Coming up.